Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. Forest. Thanks for joining us this week. I have a conversation with our old friend, Michael Phillip. He is the host of the Third Eye Drops podcast, which is an excellent podcast. You'd probably like it if you like this podcast. We've had him on the show before, and we always get into some interesting corners of conversation. I mean, we were talking today, recording this on sort of a rainy morning on the weekend, and, both feeling in some ways the heaviness of what's going on, but really trying to get into like, what does that mean? What do we do with it? What are the philosophical corners and implications of this? So I think it's rich. And the episode goes for, around an hour, and then it fades out. If you want to hear the remainder of our conversation, we got a bit more personal there at the end, at least just sort of shifted the topic a bit, and that is featured over on my Patreon. So we call it The Council on Patreon, patreon.com/EastForest. And I do sometimes share exclusive content from the podcast, such as the remainder of this conversation with Michael, but I also share music, demos. I found these demos from 2008 for my very first record, and I'm sharing those this month over on the Patreon. And we do a monthly Zoom council right now where we get to gather and witness, and I do a live musical meditation. And this month in June of 2022, in honor of the solstice, I'm going to do a live, we're going to open up essentially the Zoom gathering that I do with a particular tier on the Patreon, but it's going to be open to everybody. So if you sign up this month on any tier, you can join us. It'll be on June 30th, I believe, is when the actual live thing is happening. And if you can't make it, you'll still have access to watch it and listen to the meditation, the music meditation in retrospect. But that'll be on the evening at 5 p.m. Pacific time on June 30th. So go over to patreon.com/EastForest and see if you'd like to just sign up, even for the month, test it out, see if it's for you. I think it's $4 at the lowest tier, and it goes up for there. But we appreciate the support. I want to thank Gwen for signing up in this last week. And I just love, it's a great way to support the podcast, and I appreciate and love to see everybody there. It's a fun way to interact. I have been working on a new record for a long time, and I've been back from touring for about 2 weeks now. I've got another week before heading down to southern Utah, where we're going to be helping Harry Grammer out, who is also on the podcast. Fantastic podcast episode. If you haven't heard Harry Grammer's episode here on 10 Laws. But he's got a New Earth retreat with youth from LA that I'm just really excited to go down there and be part of it, participate, play some music, go on some hikes, and help open people's concepts of the world and give them space to just be. So that's a beautiful private retreat coming up. But I've been working on music and having a lot of insights and breakthroughs, doing a lot of vocals and recording drums and recording upright bass. I've been working with Jens Karas and Owen Hoffman-Smith. And it's been I felt like I broke through in a certain way on some intractable creative things that I've been working on for months now. And that's always an exciting moment to sort of try new things, and it starts to coalesce. So what I'm trying to say is I'm excited to share it with you. That's coming down the pike. I have some other releases coming out soon that precede that are already done that I'm excited to share with you. But this week, we did release one more single, the last one from the Still Possible album. It's called Old Tales. You're going to hear it at the end of the episode here. And the whole album comes out, a couple more tracks, the whole thing on June 17th. And it's all B-sides from my Possible album, the Possible Sessions, and just tracks that were orphans, essentially. They didn't fit in on the whole record, so I'm just finding a way to share some things that I still found were special, but they're just sort of floating in the ether, as it were. So Old Tales just came out, so wherever you listen to music, you can hear all those tracks off the Still Possible album, and thank you so much. We also added a couple live dates. We're going to be on June 25th, Doubleblind. You know the Doubleblind? It's a magazine, online and physical. It's a cool little magazine. Has a lot to do with psychedelic advocacy and education. They're doing a little festival down there in Ojai, California. And I'll be down there doing a ceremony concert. And Aubrey Marcus, our friend Aubrey, is hosting and producing his own first festival called Arkadia in Alpine, Wyoming. And I'm going to be performing that as well. That's in the middle of July, between July 14th and 17th, I believe. And we still have those other dates that are up, including London in November. Hope to add some more dates around that. And some other stuff going on, including the Love, Serve, Remember Ram Dass retreat in North Carolina at the end of August. And our Esalen retreat coming up in July over the July 4th weekend is sold out, but we're going to be adding another one that will be ticketed soon or available to sign up December 9th through 12th. And you can go to eastforest.org for all of those. There's also a wait list if you want to hear about the Esalen retreat as soon as it does open. Sign up for the newsletter, and we will let you know as soon as that is available. I think that's mostly the housekeeping. There might be other things, but I want to get into this conversation because this was a fun one with our friend, Michael Phillip. Booyah. What's up, my friend? How are you?
What's up, man? It's always wonderful to be with you in any iteration of Mind Meld.
Yeah, trying to think the last time we got a chance to connect was it a year?
I don't know,
sure.
man. I honestly don't know. It's weird how
been a minute.
The pod dimension sort of just takes on its own weird timeline. I'm always shocked when it's been, when I'm like, it can't be a year, but it could well be a year. I don't know.
Well, you still have the fractalness behind you, but now there's some prayer flags.
This is true.
Yeah. I just put up some new prayer flags outside, and when the old prayer flags get torn apart and eventually rip, I feel like it's sort of like a dead plant that you need to, not like you have to deal with that from a feng shui perspective. Yeah. And I took the prayer flags down, and I thought, I need to bury these or something. I feel bad just like throwing them out, so I just buried them in the yard.
I have a funny similar story. We have a little Buddha figure on our like little makeshift altar in the living room, and his head fell off.
What do you mean his head fell off?
Literally, his head just like broke, like it just came off. I can't remember why.
Fell off. I think your cat had something to do with this.
It was definitely a shock, like when it happened. I think maybe it was being moved and it just kind of fell off. And I was like, this has to be an omen. And then if you look up, what do you do with like a broken Buddha figure? What's the thing you're supposed to do? There is no agreed upon answer. Some of it is like,
surprise.
It's an opportunity for impermanence. Just throw it out. It's just, it's not really, it's like, what is it? Some kind of idol? It's just there as a reminder. And yeah, that's always a really interesting reflection is, what is the proper way to treat sacred objects, especially when they break? Because they're just objects, right? Like prayer flags are objects, Buddha figures are objects. Whatever's, sacred to you is an object. So it's like almost like a Rorschach.
No, I definitely think it's in my mind, yet it's very much in my mind. I mean, I had a Buddha that broke, and it was in my studio here, and it smashed. It was a head, and I put it into the garden. And then I also had... Radha had it was a big sculpture of Jesus she found at a yard sale, but it was a black Jesus. Like it was actually black. And we had this out here in our little area, and it also got knocked over in the wind, which is even creepier, and shattered. And I was like, what do I do with shattered black Jesus? And I buried that too in the same spot. I just felt like I needed to give it some reverence, but
I like that.
It's interesting though, because I have a painting of Maharaji. I've got pictures of Maharaji all over. There's this painting in the bedroom, and I see it when I go to bed and when I wake up, and it is like a Rorschach. And that I definitely am imparting feelings into like he's more of like, oh, right now I'm getting a smile from this picture. It's like the Mona Lisa, or right now I feel like I'm getting a frown. But I'm like, but sometimes I have this trip. I'm like, it's just love coming to me, and I'm the one imparting any kind of shame on it or these messages. I'm like, maybe that whole thing is just me. I want to let all that go. And it's just presence. And all the other stuff is just these stories in my head.
I think so. I mean, I think that makes sense, right? Like when you feel like in any, meaningful spiritual experience you've ever had, or, maybe I'm projecting my own experiences onto you. But there always is that sense of like putting down that, oh yeah, why was I worried about that shit?
Yeah.
What, that thing that seemed to be taking up so much square footage in what feels like a limited mind suddenly is shrunken down to an insignificant little, nothing. And so I think it makes sense that whatever that thing that is happening out there / in there, really its core state is probably just that kind of awareness you were just describing. And then we're flavoring it with our own fears, mortality, anxiety, whatever.
Yeah, we are definitely, I don't know, we see things from such of our own human perspective. It's very difficult to like not anthropomorphize, in a sense, everything. I mean, how can you not?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so that's what happened with my prayer flags yesterday. So I like that addition. But aside from the aesthetics of your room, it's a lot more purple now too.
Oh yeah, did I not have the light last time?
I think you did, but this feels like it's really going there. It's going full.
It's hyper
royal.
purple.
Yeah,
hyper purple. It also depends what camera I'm using, I think, because I have a new. I mean, we can talk tech afterward, unless anyone wants to hear about my new MacBook.
Yeah, but what has been on the frontier of your conversations in your life that you feel like you've been edging up against, or that's just sort of been wrestling in your mind and your heart these days? If you need a prompt,
That's
I can tell you what it is for me.
Man.
But
I'm
more curious.
Yeah, please do.
Well, I've been speaking a lot about just sort of these dichotomies that we feel. It's just like on one hand, I've had these moments of feeling very creatively engaged and enjoying this time of year and the beautiful, like, clear skies, and there's not smoke in the air, and just riding my bike around while the weather is warmed up. And the other half of me is feeling the incredible heaviness of a world like dying and all the crazy suffering happening from, on every level, as we all know. And we've almost become inured to this over a few years through COVID, and it's always been there, but the background noise has become a lot louder.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just kind of living in those dualist, you're living with it all at once. So for me, it's just weird and heavy, but also there's a fullness to it, like some kind of unveiling of something. But so it's just, I don't know, man. I'm just kind of holding like these different realities at once, and you kind of bounce between them in a sense, or sometimes hold them at the same time.
I do feel that, and that's actually one thing that has been a constant kind of through line in a lot of the pods I've been doing lately, is this, maybe it is not novel in the sense that I think everybody thinks they're on the tip of the spear psychically, or that they're living in some kind of transformative time or apocalyptic time or something like that. But it's hard, man. It's hard to deny that there's not some kind of thick, transformative energy in the ether right now, both personally and on the macro. Like I remember toward the beginning of the year, people talking about who are into astrology, talking about ultra rare planetary alignments that haven't happened in like thousands of years. And, I always remain kind of ambivalent on that way of interpreting things, but intuitively and personally, dude, I do feel that in my own life, like really feeling a pull for major transition. And also, it's clear when you look at the macro. I mean, from the economic to wars to, the pandemic to shootings to all of these things, it's really difficult to dismiss all of that as a discrete symptom that's just unique. Like it feels more like it's growing out of something bigger.
And as above, so below, right? It's like, what's so interesting about it is that for all of us, well, you can let me know if this is true for you too, but it is mirrored, like this sort of outer chaos is mirrored as an inner transformation that's very unique for every person. Very, very specific to like you said, some kind of calling, like I'm feeling like I want to shift this, or this thing is really breaking down in my life, or in my community, my family, something is really going on. Are you feeling like you're wanting to make change, or change is being forced upon you?
Both. That's a really, that's a great way to put it. And maybe the visual I'm getting right away is the, the visual of, all right, the waters, the rapids are moving faster.
Yeah.
And whatever your static position happens to be is under threat. It's not going to last, right? And you can either hunker down and resist the current for as long as you want, or just let the inevitable take its course and be like, all right, this is the way the water's going. I should probably let go and flow into that. Like that is kind of how it feels for me personally.
But that's, I think what's a little hard about that is sometimes it's actually kind of tough to know, like, well, where is the water flowing? I mean, the natural reaction is like, I don't want to flow into just like things breaking apart in my life. There's like, we naturally want to move towards balance. And I mean, that's a human thing. So it's kind of goes against the grain of our instincts. In some ways, it is your instinct, but your brain's saying like, oh, hold up here.
Yeah.
Put some guardrails on this, or like, how can we protect yourself through this? But I'm not sure like how far it wants to cut to the bone, because of a lot of us, like, we are trying to hang on to what's working. Like, we keep podcasting, or like I tried to go out there and continue to do dates or continue to make music. I don't feel like the calling is to disappear.
Yeah.
But there's a recognition that continuing forward in the same way, there's a friction there. And it's like, how can we decrease the friction? And perhaps it's more just, it's a process that's underway. And so it's revealing itself, perhaps over generations even. We're in this weird liminal space where it's like, oh, for us, it's always just going to be funky for a long time.
Yeah, no, I do think that the intergenerational flow is a thing. And, that's become another kind of popular topic in New Age woo circles, right? The ancestral trauma or ancestral knowledge or whatever it is. But I do think that although it can take on kind of a cartoonish flavor, I think there's something there. Like, I mean, I think that there is something kind of working its way through multiple generations. I had a really naturally psychedelic experience a couple months ago, because I had my 100-year-old grandfather passed away, and it was like, it was a long time coming. It wasn't a shock by any means, but seeing the multiple generations that were his progeny, and like being in the same room as like, my immediate family, and then his other kids' immediate families, and his other kids' immediate families, and then their immediate families. It's like, that is a naturally psychedelic moment. Like seeing the plant-like structure of your family right there, like, wow. And then they're going to go all on to have children probably. And then they're going to have children. And it just keeps working its way, and maybe it's simple genetics, maybe it's simple reproduction, but it does kind of doesn't it feel to you like intergenerationally something is working itself out? Like I posted this young quote the other day that really seemed to resonate with people. That was something along the lines of like, the greatest burden of the child is the unlived life of the parent.
Burn, you said?
The greatest burden. The greatest burden of the child is the unlived life of the parent.
You pass that baton down, and you pass everything down. So in some ways, the more, if you said the word burn, like the more you can burn through in a way.
That's true.
The more the child can then continue the burn in their own way, which is a kind of growth and fertilization. It's like burning through karma, burning through trauma. Yeah. Everything that's become epigenetically down the line. I mean, I'm sure we've continued in the past, shall we say, to make very bad choices as human beings that we're now reaping a lot of the results. You're like, why is the world so fucked up? It's like, I bet we've done some we know we have a lot of horrible things we've done, and just keep taking that line back to being, Stone Age and just like murdering and stealing and learning.
Yeah.
And here we are, and when you're incarnate, you have this magical ability, it feels like, to affect both your history, family tree, backwards and forwards. It's just a psychedelic idea I can't prove, but I feel that.
Yeah.
And then we also have this recognition that really, let's say 3 generations maybe, is about all we remember and know. And you go beyond that, it just disappears. It really everything we're doing, everything we care about, everything we make will basically just be gone.
Yeah. I was watching, on that note, with my family, my stepdad was watching this show called, I think it's 1883. And it's a prequel to the show Yellowstone, which I also haven't seen. But I bring it up because it's about some European immigrants that are beginning this really, really arduous journey from Texas to Oregon, like Oregon Trail type vibe. And it's just terrible. I mean, it's like people are getting,
it's terrible. Everyone dies.
It's like there's disease everywhere. People are getting shot. It's completely lawless. It's just wild. And then you stop and think, and you're like, oh yeah, like almost for sure, someone in my family dealt with this and survived this, and I have no knowledge, knowledge. And I'm just like sitting here, like picking my nose, eating epic bars and like worrying about like the next episode of Stranger Things or whatever the fuck I'm doing. And it's just so crazy, man, that we're built off of this immense suffering so that we can get to these almost like, I mean, we're at kind of an oasis in time right now, aren't we? Like compared to the past in a lot of ways.
It's a turbulent oasis. That's kind of what we're saying at the beginning. Like it is an oasis of opportunity, invention, and comfort. At the same time, global connection where the worst thing that happens every day in detail in a way.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like things that happen affect a global scale very quickly. That's what was so strange about the pandemic, or is, I should say, is that it was now like a physical, old school thing that did the same thing the internet does. It affected people collectively on one thing. And you thought that would be this sort of ultimate unveiling of like, look, this is really this is how interconnected we actually are, literally, physically. And even with that, we're still just like, I don't know, that camp over there, I don't like them, and this person's lying, and we couldn't quite get over the Rubicon of compassion.
No. Yeah, I want to believe that there is some sort of pronoic agenda on the part of the planet. Like, it's like, oh, this is the sort of initiatory struggle humans need to come together, and then we just blunder the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
And she's like, all right, well, that didn't work. All right, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? And maybe this is an interesting road to take. What do you think it would take for most people to get psychically aligned, like ideologically together back in a sort of like we're one big human family thing? Like, do you think that's even possible?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's a kind of tribalism. Like, so what would create one tribe? And it's sadly the same thing that creates tribes now. It's an othering. Like we have to have something we're fighting against collectively. COVID wasn't enough. So it's like, geez, how bad would that have to be to this abject, like, forcing of we are in this together, and that climate change isn't doing it. And I think, like, even if like aliens came down and just land, it was like full on, everyone fully accepts that actually is happening. Because, the first thing is people would disagree that it's even happening, or it's a hoax, or this camp is lying to this camp, or it's really a secret government. All these,
right.
Let's just assume we're all like, yup, the aliens are here. They just came. We can see what the ships look like. They're talking. Here's the message. Even then, we'd still probably would have a difficult time transcending our day-to-day bullshit, because truthfully, I mean, it wouldn't go away. You still have to deal with your stuff. You still have your stuff. You still have your journey that you're working on, your psychological issues, your traumas, all that stuff is still there. So campus Earth seems to be designed to not be able to escape our work. You can play hooky, but you never leave the school in a way. And I don't mean that to be bad news. It's sort of like, I mean, part of this is like it's raining today, and so I probably am just, my mindset is a bit shifted. But it's
I
not
actually
that
think it's raining here too. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I don't feel completely negative. I'm just saying it's a recognition of how much suffering is really going on, how you and I are like eating power bars. And like, I'm saying it comes to roost for all of us in our times. But amidst all of this, I also feel in my bones too a kind of transformation and opportunity and beauty that may feel stronger than I've ever felt in my life. And it's all happening at the same time. And I guess I feel some guilt about that almost. I feel like, or it's just like, that's why I feel so full. It's like, I feel that sadness as I'm feeling also peace at moments. Yeah. It's just a lot to hold.
Yes, it is. And I mean, I think this is what happens on the sort of, to put it in the Jungian terms, the individuation journey, when you start to play in the deeper waters, like past your own ego, it's not this light show of fairy tales and beauty all the time. It's like, I think it is more what you're talking about. It's the same if you look at the Eastern lens, like the Bodhisattva vow. It's like, yeah, let me just take on the collective suffering of all of mankind for the rest of eternity until I free all, sentient beings or whatever the Bodhisattva vow is. It's like, that's not fun. Like we want to believe that it's like going to be some sort of knight in shining armor slaying the dragon situation. And I'm not saying that the Western kind of interpretation of this does appeal to me as well. But I think that when you think about it in overly simplistic terms like that, you're missing part of it because, again, on the Western path, Jung was very clear that it's like, no, you're taking on so much suffering and darkness if you're on this path, and the light. Like, you're going for wholeness. You're not going for good or bad. You're going for wholeness. You're going for truth. You're going for maximum recognition of what's going on with you and with the world. And that's a heavy burden, man. And I think, it's one of those questions where if you stopped people on the street and said like, hey, do you want real truth in your life? Do you
want the
you
red
really
pill?
want to? Yeah. And they'll be, oh yeah, bro, I take the red pill. Of course. Not
of course.
And it's like, okay, well, so do you see that homeless guy over there? Do you think he's suffering? And you notice how, a lot of people are like, oh, well, they're probably, it's really easy. That's one that's really easy to bypass, right? Like they probably got themselves there through addiction. They probably, they're probably not really like they might be making more money than me. That's one that I hear sometimes, It's like, do you know how much money those guys make out there every day? They make like $500 a day. I saw a YouTube video or something, and it's like, or really consider the possibility of that person's fucking suffering and you're not doing anything about it. And you could, but you're not.
I mean, honestly, however much money you're making begging on the street, it sucks to beg. It just, any way you look at it, it's not a good position to be in. It's not fun. It's nobody grew up as a little kid dreaming about that. Like, I'm just going to relax, not have a job and float around and just take money from people when they give it to me. It takes a lot of courage. So, I mean, on the flip side, from that Jungian viewpoint, it's honorable too. Like to say, I want to feel the fullness. I want to have my eyes fully open. I don't want to just close my ears to what I hear. I want to feel that I can hold more, because from that Bodhisattva view, it's like I want to have compassion for it all, and just it's okay to feel it, because a lot of what we do is we just push it away with some other thing. Just distract it, fill it with content, so I don't have to feel and hear that background noise all the time. And I think it's okay to have a little space to just feel it. Like, you feel you might break, but it's like you're not going to break. You're just going to feel a lot, and it will move. Everything in the universe just moves and passes, just like that Fibonacci behind you. It's all flow. just keeps flowing, and it's just more and more and more and more, and you're part of that. So it takes courage to do that, man. It's honorable, I think, just to feel these days.
Yeah. You see a lot of feeling in your own vocation. Like you probably see more feeling in a given night than like most people do in years, because most people, when they're going through their daily rigmarole, you're dealing with, default mode network, do the thing, navigate the thing, keep a stoic straight face, and you're seeing like the total opposite, man. You're seeing like the
Splay me open.
Yeah, like what they, the transient hypofrontality or whatever they call it, where those networks turn off, the sense of self gets blown open, and you're not even existing as yourself, at least subjectively, for a little while. And does that, I guess maybe you don't have time to fully confront or grok that, because you're performing, you're facilitating, so you're like in your own kind of flow state, I guess. But does that ever overwhelm you when you're in the process?
Yeah,
do you ever just have to stop?
I hope not, but it can be like we did an event. I spoke about this a bit before in LA recently, where there were just like a lot of different energies in the room, like people just doing they're taking different rides. Everything from folks being really dropped in, maybe just with their breath, to medicines of different sorts, to someone doing acro yoga, to like a little group of women just having girl time and chatting like right in front of me. I'm like, what is going on here? And then some other guy who was had too much of some kind of medicine, and that you could feel that energy of like, oh boy, like where's this going? And we had to sit by him, sort of like psychedelic bouncers in a way, because I think he wanted to come on stage. He was totally out of it. And yeah, it is distracting. I can hear that. I can feel it. The energy is just kind of in different places. That's not always normal. But you're trying to it's like steering a ship through a storm. And sometimes it's not that stormy, and sometimes the storm's coming. It's like, well, my job is to keep the ship sailing.
Yeah.
Because people are like on this musical ship together. And if I can't, my job's now to just drop that. It's like, I'm going to be your captain for the next X number of hours. And that guy actually wrote me a message and apologized a few days ago. Yeah. I don't normally see these messages.
I thought you were going to pick it up there. Like, I got it right here.
Sorry.
I'll take over. East Forest is currently coughing. He got a little liquid down the wrong tube, but he is simply on a trip that was unplanned for just a moment here, and he will emerge back into
Holy shit, that was that's like when you need water to help you, and everything goes the wrong way. Holy cow.
That's never fun, man. That's never fun.
Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this guy.
Yeah. His daimon is spanking you.
He recognized that he kind of took the energy of the room and perhaps even traumatized other people and hijacked things. And I appreciate that he was owning that and honoring that. But that's sort of the state we're in. Like it's like the playing field we're on is so tumultuous, and the state of the world is just so active that I think people need to be mindful that it doesn't take much to throw us off our center.
No.
But inevitably people, they make errors in judgment. And they're like, oh man, this is more than I thought I could handle, or the situation I'm in is not the best place. And so for me, I can't control that. And you're in this space, this interesting like public-private space, hybrid performance medicine, where I'm not necessarily inviting that at all. And I'm not even, because I want there to be boundaries, but I'm also recognizing we're all human beings, and what's coming up in the room, I'm doing my best to work with it, but I'm a human being too. And that sometimes is a lot to handle. but just having some history in the past of working in medicine spaces, I guess there's in the background a little bit of familiarity of like everything moves. It's like just keep the warmth and the energy moving forward. Be that rock that people can stand on. But it's helpful to have help in the room. To have people that's like I'm not just alone. It's only so much I can do with the music and the sound.
Yeah, it's when you go into that psychic wilderness that any kind of visionary substance can thrust you into. You don't know, like you don't know what tides were being held back by consensus reality neuroscience until it's gone.
Oh my
gosh. Some people are just on the brink of schizoid or just need so much catharsis. Like, man, the very first when I was in Peru a couple years ago, the first ayahuasca ceremony was like an absolute fucking psychic hand grenade, just like went off in the room. And it was like this one woman who's just, she was awesome. And she became our friend after this. And, like highly, I don't want to like give away who she is potentially, but like, not that she's like a well-known person, but if you really wanted to like dig through social media, maybe you could figure it out. So I'll just say she's like a very professional job, a very, together person, was just, to the shamans, fuck yeah, just like completely, like taking over the room. And she actually had to be escorted out. But it wasn't just her, man. It was just a cacophony of insanity. And like,
that was your first experience?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a hard one for me too. I was like in the corner, like huddled, like, make it stop, kind of like, if there is anything you got that could make it stop. Like I was actually asking for it. And of course they're like, nope, there's not. You're stuck. And yeah, that can happen. It's not going to go the way you want it to go necessarily. And that's where the courage comes in, I think, in doing any kind of psychic experimentation or quote unquote healing work. Or
well, tell me about the full picture of your experience so we can hear more about like how you felt about it afterwards, or how that experience ended up integrating into your life.
Totally. So overall, I mean, the place was beautiful. The people there were all great. The container was good. The audience was good, but the experiences themselves were very tumultuous for me in general. Like it was the most difficult in terms of physical, mental miasma that I've ever gone through in any of these experiences that I've had with any kind of psychedelics. And it took until the third night for there to feel like, at least within the container of the experience itself, it took that long for anything that felt positive or like progress to happen. However, on the other end, coming out of it each night, I did feel like, all right, we're back. I went from feeling like there's no possible way I will ever ingest this substance again, to about an hour afterward being like, all right, I'll be back the next night. But it was kind of like that for me the entire experience, the entire week-long experience. But it is definitely, you're working through just so much fear, so much darkness, so much that's bottled up that it needs to happen. Like that catharsis needs to happen. You were talking about moving into that darkness instead of avoiding it. And that's what was happening for me. It was like all of this bottled up, I think fear was the essence of it, was spilling out. And afterward, it does feel incredibly like something's been lifted, like you had psychic weight you almost didn't know was there until it's purged and burned off in that way.
How long ago is that?
This was maybe 2 years ago, I think now.
Do you feel any like elongated effects or any sort of like resonance from that experience that's still alive today?
I feel like I'm due again, honestly.
Wow.
I feel like for a while there was like this knowing, this base level foundation of no matter what, you're going to be fine. No matter what, like when things start to feel like they're tumbling out of control or anxiety sets in or, just fears about the future, fears about mortality, fears about whatever that we all deal with. For a while, there was always this ground floor. That was sort of the knowing that eventually broke through that third night that I was alluding to before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every so often you need to refresh that. And I think I'm sort of in a place now where honestly, I probably need to refresh that. And that might be part of this, like, I was being kind of ambiguous about feeling this need for something to change or this need for...
Is that it?
It might be another encounter with the threshold guardian kind of thing.
It's amazing to think about like what that space can feel like. We were really on the edge of everything in a sense and going across some kind of boundary. And like you said, the courage it takes, there's an inevitability to it, but yet there's this element of choice. And how the suffering and the relief, really, the sort of tension and release that happens with that is so profound. And in some ways, it's sort of speaking to what we were speaking about at the beginning here, this idea of like holding opposing feelings or the fullness of it all. It's really the ultimate fullness, and then really feeling the other side, the other polarity of it. And it awakens something in our humanness of like, now I feel fully human. There's parts of me that I felt maybe I was missing, and now I'm fully in them. It's a warrior energy and a mother energy at the same time. It's that work is like, it's honorable, and I feel like it has a significance into.
I think it does, and I think it may also feed back into what we're talking about. You can look at that Young quote about the greatest burden of the children is the unlived life of the parent. You can look at that as like a very surface level. My parents never did this, so I will do it. You can look at it that way. Or you can look at it like there's actual unprocessed trauma or energy or whatever that they were born with that they never dealt with just due to not knowing how, just due to necessity, just due to, I guess, unconsciousness. And I think in those states, when there is such an upsurge of fear, of just darkness, of dealing with things that you don't even know where they're coming from, maybe that's what you're doing. Maybe you're processing, like you're unloading shit that you were like born into this world with, that you have never been able to directly touch because it's embedded so deeply. Maybe it's epigenetically, maybe it's even genetic, maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's all of the above. Maybe there's no difference. But to me, like when you hit that well of just like what feels like this, like a well of darkness, it's almost like this goes on forever.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is this? I don't know if I think that feels like it reaches beyond the individual. Like that feels it reaches into the like almost like collective shadow or something.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's most people probably had that feeling on psychedelic journeys at some point. You're feeling the complete bottomless well of suffering, the collective suffering, whether it's been across all time and right now. It's just like, oh, wow. But again, it's about polarities. Everything has its opposing energy that keeps things flowing in this incarnation, in this state that we find ourselves in. And you also tend to get to feel like, as you move into the fullness of the nothingness, in a sense, you start to feel all that is. As sometimes there's like just law. It's like all this is just law. It's so immense and imposing, but it's not positive or negative at times. You just feel like this is the constituent energy of all that is, and that in itself, it can be so awe-inspiring to just witness being a part of that. And it's not something you negotiate with. It just is.
Yeah.
And so all that suffering and all the success, all of it's just in there. And it's just, if anything, it's humbling.
It's very humbling.
I'm not even. It's a space it's hard to put your finger on anyway. So I can't just say like it's X, Y, Z. But I just know it's a powerful. It's a very powerful feeling. It's way beyond just mind, of just like what I'm able to think about in my head. It's just like, whoa, this is the an intelligence. I don't know if that's the right word, like a sense of design that's so much infinitely larger than anything I could ever conceive. But now I'm able to conceive it in a sense through feeling that humbleness is the effect. It's awe-inspiring.
Yeah. And this is why I'm so drawn to the word psyche, or like the like in terms of like a collective psyche, because it does feel like there is this self beyond self, like a capital S self that small s self is connected to, and we normally don't perceive the boundary or the ability to move back and forth. But then when you are in these psychedelic states, where the psyche comes forth, as the word literally refers to in its etymology, you're like, oh yeah, like that tide of psyche is always just right there, like right up against the wall.
Wow.
And it's always flavoring, it's always flavoring me in ways that I don't perceive, but it's there. And it feels like that blows right open for me. And because, I guess I'll take a moment to just like give the silver lining of those experiences for me. Anytime I do come up against that well of suffering, which almost inevitably, it's like it blows my mind how much the psychedelic experience mirrors the cycle of the hero's journey, where you're always going to hit that rock bottom place where you're just like, oh fuck, like this is the abyss, like there's no coming out of this. Inevitably you do come out of it, and then you're honest with yourself, hopefully, in that you acknowledge like this is real, like this place is real. I was just there. Because it's tempting to bypass it, because eventually you get to the, not always, but a lot of times you get to a good part after the bad part. And then if you get to the good part, you're like, oh, the whole point of the bad part is to get to the good part.
Or so that it can be a good part in a sense, or vice versa. Like they're all servants to one another.
Yeah, but then if you're honest with yourself, you're like, no, the bad part takes up a lot of that square footage, and it's probably never not going to. Unless there's some kind of like, real Pure Land Buddhism kind of realm where you can just be, in a realm of light or whatever forever. But for me, it's always like we go on in spite of that. We do it in spite of that, because the alternative is that sort of existential, absurdist, Albert Camus fundamental question of like, so do you kill yourself or do you not kill yourself? Like that's how he starts Myth of Sisyphus, right? Like he starts it with like, first and most important question is, life is absurd. Do we go on with it or not? And he says, yeah, you go on with it. And we can get into that whole thesis, but but it feels more like not only do I agree with him in principle, I agree with him for a deeper reason than he would want to acknowledge, which is like a spiritual reason. It's like we're carrying some kind of fire forward here collectively, and does that matter or does that not matter? And I think it matters immensely. I think there's a process ongoing that most people including myself, by the way, are largely ignorant of, but we have the opportunity to contribute toward. And I know that's like ambiguous and vague, but
it has to be in a sense.
Yeah, because it fits everyone's life, right? For it to fit everyone's life, it has to be ambiguous and vague. Yet you have to use that kind of mythological imagery of something working its way. And that's what I always feel like when I come out of those states, is like it's an increased knowledge of the high and the low, but also a momentary encounter with the fact that you have an opportunity to bear this flame forward.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
That's the human journey, carrying the torch is it in itself. And I mean, if all that is creates something that it is not, in order for all that is to discover itself again, essentially.
Whoa, that sounded very Taoist or something. Is that like a Tao Te Ching?
Then why wouldn't you create it to be as infinitely, the spectrum would be as far as it'd be fractally infinite, so that the fullness of what you're discovering is the same. Because it's hard. It doesn't make sense, but it does. It's like, so the torch, the fire would burn real hot to make it the fullest experience and the fullest fire. And that doesn't diminish how difficult it is. But I agree. I keep getting that same sense over and over again, from mundane things, from small synchronicities to large synchronicities to big psychedelic experiences, to just looking at a leaf in the wind and hearing a certain sound. And I get the same feeling of like, there is meaning and it's important. And yet there's nothing, just this is it. And it's almost like a stripping away of all the things we hold on to and all the bullshit that we want to be and don't want to be. It's like all of that is just machinations of your mind and karma that's built up, and it actually, none of that is it. And it's some kind of discovery process of working through all that infinite well of suffering and then realizing I can let that go. It's not about fixing it, right? No, we have to work through it. It's like, what if not? What if it's just about releasing, accepting?
Right, accepting. I think that's
just
what it is.
Holding, be like, I'm not changing anything. I'm just here. I'm with it. I'm loving it. And there's an impossibility to that when we're in this timeline of our lives. But in those spaces, you get these glimpses, and you get it in your lives, as I'm saying, in these micro moments. And it's connecting the dots from these different experiences is like a through line you can hold for yourself that feels like a truth that's an untruth. I mean, it's a Buddhist koan or something, and that's maddening on one level to you, but at the same time, it's like you always have the answer in a way.
Yeah. I think that koan kind of truth is the closest to an actual truth a human being's allowed to get, because it's not a truth that you ever solve in the way of like a math equation. It's that you start to intuitively understand it by understanding all of the ways that you don't understand it, by like really, really getting one of these paradoxical questions. And, like an example is, show me the face you had before you were born or something is one of the ones I remember hearing. There's also kind of a longer winded version of it, I think, where it's like there's two Buddhist disciples, and one of them ends up getting the master's robe or his something that's kind of the symbol of his dharma, kind of symbolizing like you're gonna carry on my dharma after I go. And then the other Buddhist monk who doesn't get it is like angry. So he finds out that his counterpart got it, and he kind of chases after him, and he like chases him down the road and chases him up a mountain or something. And he gets there, and his plan is to like forcibly take it from him, like forcibly take the robe or whatever the object was. And he tries to lift it, and it's like lifting a mountain. It's like he can't lift it. And then he immediately, is kind of overwhelmed with the realization that he completely had like lost the teaching and had like lost his Buddha nature by getting emotional like that and by trying to take it forcibly. And then the one who is now the bearer of the Dharma shows up, and like he just crying to him and says, please just like give me a teaching, give me a lesson. And then that's his lesson, as he says, show me the face you had before you were born. And then in that moment, he's like completely lit up with like transcendent knowledge and like Satori and whatever for a moment. Mm-hmm. And then that's the koan, is like what happened. It's like, and I don't know what happened. It's like I have all these different ideas. And the point is like not to be able to answer the question, but to think about that story from every conceivable minutia, from like that, like, is there a code in the wording? Is there a coding in the names of these figures? What does it mean that the robe was like a mountain? What does it mean that he said this?
Well, it's also about not thinking about those things. That's kind of the point. It's like you can use your mind to try to decipher the riddle, but it's undecipherable. That's the point. It's eventually the gears stop, and then you experience it through the nothingness. And that's the gift of the paradox in itself. Yeah. So the no answer is the answer, that kind of thing. And I know that's like we've been hearing that forever, and it's in some ways maddening. But when you actually experience it, it's the opposite of it. It's a relief.
Or I would say the experience of trying to answer it is the answer. The experience of struggling and grappling and not being able to come to a final answer. Isn't that symbolic of life? It's like, that's what life largely is, right? Is like grappling, trying. Oh, I think this is my destiny. Going down that road and finding out like, oh, fuck. Well, I still got old and died, or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, but you had the experience, right? You had the experience of grappling. You had the experience of growing, of experiencing love, of experiencing sadness, of experiencing the ups, the downs, everything you can imagine that a lifetime contains, and all the things you can't imagine that you'll eventually experience. Maybe that in and of itself is this sort of, bittersweet answer.
There you go, folks. On our rainy
Yeah,
I'm
right.
kidding. It's not. I don't think like this is a dark conversation. I think it's more grappling with the shadow in a sense, which pushing it away is ridiculous. We all deal with it every moment. It's just part of being who we are, and so in some ways, illuminating like this of just sort of wrestling, and like this whole conversation is kind of wrestling with the impossibility, in a sense.
Yeah. And in a weird way, it makes me feel better. It makes me feel, because I think it's just underneath the surface, like we're kind of roiling around in people's minds all the time, and they just don't have a way to talk about it. And it just like, it's kind of therapeutic,
I agree. I guess in your thinking, if like the thinking about it is the process, like that is the jewel, then yes. It's like exploring the different corners of it with your mind, so that you're shining light on all these different areas, and you're like, all right, I guess I see the room a bit, and that somehow makes me feel a little more comforted that I know where I am. I didn't want to look over there, and I haven't looked down there in a long time. I don't really want to know what's going on. How do I that feeling. Oh God. But
I'm emphatically
not as scary, perhaps.
Yeah, it's like, when you're worried about some huge project like that, you're just or something you have to do, putting it off like is all you're doing is prolonging the worry, right? It's like get in there, like organize.
That's
the
shit.
Ayahuasca
message is like,
yes,
you can put it off, but it just hurts. The pain is not releasing, not flowing in.
Yeah. So if you have to look at, all of these, we're kind of like doing like a big game of ontological spitballing here. Like what's really the situation? Like, what do you think's the most likely? If I just asked you that question directly, what do you think is the most likely Gestalt thing that's going on here, both as individuals and in the macro. What is your actual suspicion at this moment in time on this rainy day?
I think in the
Not
biggest
to flavor.
sense, it's cosmic peekaboo, and it's a metaphor of, it's like when you play with a baby, and you just do this in front of your eyes, you hide yourself, and then, oh my gosh, I'm back, and the joy on the baby's face, both the humor of it and the actual like forgetting and remembering, I feel like is that the best way I could sum up perhaps what this entire thing is forgetting so that we can remember, so we can have the fullness of the joy of really remembering. Means you have to really forget. And if you could make it like really forgetting, in a sense where you experience infinite lifetimes of it,
Yeah.
Imagine the return, and then doing that infinite times. I guess that would be the ultimate like love bomb, baby to mother. We all came out of a mother, quite literally. So if we go to the as above, so below, perhaps it all is come out of every star coming out of other stars, and the Big Bang coming out of some other Big Bang. Again, back to your fractal behind you there. That's the answer. It's like the Romanesca broccoli in the grocery store. Unfortunately, gave it up. It's like it's too on the nose, as I like to say.
That's funny.
But well, I don't know. What do you think? That's cosmic peekaboo.
Yeah, I mean, I like that a lot. You know, it gives me cosmic trickster, Alan Watts vibes, and I like that very much. But part of it does feel like being a human is not where you want to be ultimately. Like it's an
prison.
It's like an opportunity.
Punishment.
Like it feels like being a human is for sure some kind of opportunity. Like it's for sure some kind of, if there's a point to it at all. Like it feels like it's like, all right, I have a chance to do something here and make some realizations here. But ultimately it kind of feels like you're in a, you know, because from an Eastern perspective, samsara is not where you want to be. It's not like the going through the loop-de-loop of life and suffering is not like the, you know, it's like if you're a Hindu, you're looking for moksha, you're looking for release from that. If you're a Buddhist, you're looking for release from that. So there's also, you know, from the like the Neoplatonic perspective, there's this acknowledgement that I think Plotinus called this like soul fall, where there's a realization that you're sort of trapped in a lower, to you again for the fractal metaphor, you're kind of trapped in a lower dimensional reflection of what your soul actually is. So that you're a human and you're an expression of your soul, which is something closer to the macro fractal, let's say.
Yeah.
And you're kind of hypnotized or you're stuck in a mathematical kind of encryption relationship to this thing, but that ultimately you need to burn off your worldly attachments so that you can rise back up to your larger self. And I like that because it creates some kind of ontological scenario that you can grab onto and interact with, yet it's not like it's not like a fairy tale, everything's so easy and everything's happening for you and everything's just like, you know, here as a cosmic play date or something like that. That seems overly rosy. It's kind of like, nah, you kind of stumbled into something here and don't worry about it. Like you're not bad for doing it. It's just a natural result. It's something that happens to consciousness sometimes. It's something that happens on the higher order of things sometimes. And you have an opportunity to recognize that and work through that throughout your lifetime. And I think most of us are failing miserably at it, myself included.
Well, I heard in there's that book Journey of Souls. I just like some of the the little nuggets from that. And one of the people is talking about in their deep hypnosis about sort of life between life, the soul space, that look, there are many universes that you can choose in a sense to incarnate into. And this one is duality, this entire multiverse, whatever we're in here. But there's others, and they're completely different operating systems that are not even possible for us to conceive what that means. But many of those are considered, quote unquote, easier, the others. This one is considered quite gooey and difficult and intense, but it's considered one of the richer, quote unquote, faster mechanisms for growing as a soul, because dualism's is a tough one, but it's rich. And so if you also take on the mantle that, what if you choose this? This is like, there was choice involved in diving into the deeper waters, because that way you can expand into those more larger levels of your soul space and continue to expand even further from there. And that's a form of non-resistance in a way. It's like you wanted to burn through all the experiences in deeper and faster. I don't know why faster matters, but it's depressing to think that time matters at all.
We want it now. We want it now. Whatever it is.
But that's it. That's actually like this world of duality itself. Like that's my own manifestation of the feelings of like time and faster. And I mean, anyway. So if maybe it's like, maybe you picked it and you're like, I want to take a level 7 trip versus a level 3, and you've been doing this for a long time. Just to master
I mean, that has to be like a magnification of the foolhardy heroic dose consumer. It's like let's see what happens. 5 grams. Let's see what happens. It's got to be just like a magnification of that. If you really are taking that dive into the human world, my God, like in the same way
Good to see you.
yeah, right.
Another soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all basically took too many mushrooms, and here we are in this collective dream. On
we took
cosmic
too
scale.
much Amrita or ambrosia or whatever it is they eat up, down, around. Probably preposition doesn't make sense in whatever this world is, but it's the best we got. This 3D prepositions. Yeah, man. It's a weird.
On that note, that's the best we got. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. It probably is. Other than actual practical things, let's leave them with some practical advice.
Yeah, right. The top 10. Yeah, I know. That's our problem. Is we're always trying to nail it down to the easy answers, and it's all poetry. It's all metaphor.
Well, I mean, if you want to define your pecs, you got to do do all different ranges of push-ups. You got to do the kind where your hands are really close together, work it out to the wide. At least you can leave with that. You can leave with.
This is just God trying to get better looking in the mirror. Yeah.
Ooh. That's actually kind of yeah. So he can show up in God school with
just one up the other gods.
A new
it's
tattoo or something.
Yeah, check out my dualistic universe I've been working on for eternity. I'm looking fine.
That just because we're playing in the absolute ontological spitballing waters, to throw in there that this is kind of reminding me of is like, to me, it's almost equally terrifying to consider the notion that God is just barely holding on to the chaos than it is that there is no God. Because when you talk to anybody, I remember even learning this in a religious philosophy class in college, is basically, around the time of, all of the major Christian theological thinkers who were, who made all of these ideas of the omnipotent, all-knowing, omniscient God very popular. They were basically if these aren't the features of God, this is not a God worth worshiping. God has to be these things, or it's not worth worshiping. And it's just so popularly sunken into the psyche of everybody that, yeah, if there's a God, God is all-knowing, it's omniscient, he has a plan for everything. It's like, well, what if there is a God and it's just barely holding on? It's just barely holding on to the chaos. And we're part of the architects of his barely holding on.
Yeah, well, if we are God, which sometimes we have a sense that we're all the one thing, and we're kind of barely holding on our lives. We're all just sort of like 50.1%, over the line, thank God, of grace. Then I guess that's it. Like, just moving this thing forward barely holding our shit together. If you want to hear the rest of that conversation with myself and Michael, just head over to patreon.com/eastforest, and you can support the podcast over there and get exclusive content like the rest of our conversation, demos, music, and sometimes live meditations and live streams, including our monthly Zoom gathering. And the one this month, anyone who signs up for the council who is a member, that will open it up to everybody for June 30th is when that is happening. So head over and sign up and you'll get the link and join us for that live gathering and musical meditation on June 30th. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Old Tales. This is off the Still Possible album. The full album drops on June 17th. It is B-sides and orphans from the Possible sessions, and I hope you are enjoying it. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for reviewing. You guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do it with grace.